Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a place where silence feels alive, where the air itself watches you and every shadow hides something waiting. That is the village of Duskmoor. It was late autumn when Ethan Carter first heard the name. Ethan was a historian, fascinated by forgotten towns and abandoned places. His curiosity had carried him through ruined castles, deserted mining towns, and even plague-stricken hamlets. But none of them carried the same ominous warning as Duskmoor. "Don't go there," an old archivist had whispered in the county records office. "The village isn't just abandoned, it's cursed. People who step inside don't come back the same." Ethan smiled politely, dismissing the story as local folklore. But the mystery stayed in his mind, pulling at him like a thread. Within a week, he packed his journal, camera, and flashlight and set off in search of the lost village. The journey was unsettling from the very beginning. Roads narrowed until they became little more than dirt tracks. On either side, skeletal trees clawed at the gray sky. His GPS failed long before the final turn. All he had left was a hand-drawn map yellowed with age. The fog thickened as he drove, swallowing the road and muffling the world. His headlights barely cut through the swirling mist. And then, he saw it. The village emerged like a ghost from the fog. Stone cottages slumped in ruin, roofs caved in, windows shattered like broken eyes. A crooked sign half buried in weeds read, "Welcome to Duskmoor." Ethan parked his Jeep just outside the square. His boots crunched on gravel and dead leaves as he stepped into the silence. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed afraid to breathe here. The silence felt alive, pressing on his skin. He wandered through the square. In its center stood a dry fountain, topped by a stone angel with its face chipped away. At the far end of the street loomed a church, its doors wide open, as though inviting him in. But it was the cottages that drew him first. Each house seemed frozen mid-life. Cups still sat on dusty tables. Chairs were pulled back as if someone had just risen. Clothes hung stiff on wooden racks. It was as if the villagers had vanished in the middle of an ordinary day. In one cottage, Ethan found a crib in the corner, its sheets still neatly tucked. On the floor beside it were deep scratches gouged into the wood. It looked as though something had been dragged away. A chill passed over him, but he forced himself to keep taking notes, his pen scratching across the pages of his journal. Evening fell quickly. The fog grew denser, clinging to the ground like smoke. The air smelled faintly of iron, like rust or blood. Ethan decided to stay overnight. He chose the largest intact cottage, a 2-story house at the edge of the square. He lit a lantern and settled inside, reviewing his notes. That was when he heard it. A whisper. Low. Urgent. Too clear to be the wind. "Leave." Ethan froze, lantern trembling in his hand. The voice had come from upstairs. Slowly, he climbed the staircase. The wood creaked under his boots. The hallway above was lined with doors. He opened the first, empty. He opened the second, dust and broken glass. But when he reached the third door, he stopped. Its edges were blackened, scorched as if burned from within. Carved into the surface were jagged words, "They watch." Suddenly, a heavy thud slammed against the door. The walls shook. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding. Then silence returned. Too much silence. He turned to leave, eager to return downstairs. That was when he noticed the mirror at the end of the hall. His reflection wasn't alone. Behind him stood the faint outlines of several shadowy figures, tall, still, watching. Ethan spun around. The hallway was empty. He looked back at the mirror. Only his reflection remained. Panic set in. He rushed downstairs, locked the cottage door, and sank into a chair. For the first time, doubt gnawed at him. Maybe the archivist had been right. Maybe Duskmoor wasn't just abandoned. Maybe it was alive. And then it struck him. The whisper hadn't told him to leave. It had said, "We never leave." Ethan barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards above made him flinch. Every flicker of his lantern stretched the shadows too far. But the silence was worse than the sounds. It was heavy, suffocating, as if the village itself was holding its breath. At some point near dawn, he dozed in his chair. When he woke, the lantern had burned out. Pale gray light leaked through the broken shutters. He told himself he had imagined the whisper, the shadows, the figures in the mirror. But the words "we never leave" echoed in his skull like a curse. Determined to regain control, Ethan forced himself outside. The fog had not lifted with the morning. Instead, it had thickened, curling around the cottages like smoke from unseen fires. The fountain angel looked different in daylight, its eyeless face somehow crueler. Ethan's breath came out in clouds, though the air wasn't cold enough to explain it. He headed toward the church. Its doors still open, groaned faintly as though breathing. Inside, dust coated the pews and the altar was draped in black cloth. Stained glass windows, once vibrant with saints and angels, had shattered long ago. Shards littered the floor like frozen blood. A massive wooden cross leaned against the wall. But something was wrong. The figure of Christ carved upon it had no face. Instead, someone had scratched over the wood again and again until only gouges remained. Ethan's journal shook as he wrote notes. His pen scratched descriptions of decay and absence. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the church was watching him. Behind the altar stood a narrow door. He hesitated, then pushed it open. A spiral staircase descended into darkness. The air that rose from below was damp and sour. He switched on his flashlight. The beam pierced only a few feet ahead, swallowed by thick shadows. Step by step he descended, the spiral swallowing him whole. At the bottom he found a stone crypt. Dozens of coffins lined the walls, stacked like bookshelves. But their lids were not sealed. Each one was slightly open, as though pried from within. Ethan's hand trembled as he raised the flashlight. Inside the first coffin there was no body, only claw marks scratched deep into the wood. The second was the same. The third held nothing but dust and a lock of black hair. His heart pounded as he stumbled backward. Something clattered behind him. He spun the light toward the sound. A rosary lay on the ground. Its beads were cracked, its cross twisted, but no one else was in the crypt. Ethan fled the church, gasping as he burst back into the fog. The air outside, though thick and foul, felt safer than what lay below. He walked quickly toward the edge of the village, telling himself he would leave. But the path he had driven in on was gone. In its place was only more fog, rolling endlessly into nothingness. His jeep was still parked, but the road it had come on simply wasn't there. Panic gnawed at him. He tried walking past the cottages, deeper into the fields, But no matter which way he turned, the fog swallowed him and spat him back into the square. The village would not let him go. Exhausted, he returned to the cottage where he had spent the night. But when he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. The journal he had left on the table was gone. In its place sat another journal, older, its leather cracked, its pages yellow. Slowly he opened it. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. The first entry was dated 1846. It spoke of a villager named Thomas Hale, who wrote of strange figures appearing at the edge of town. The second entry spoke of whispers in the night. The third entry spoke of coffins opening on their own. Ethan flipped further. Page after page described the same thing he had just witnessed: the silence, the fog, the figures in the mirrors, even the words carved on the scorched door. They watch. His blood ran cold. Someone else had lived this before. Someone else had been trapped here. And then he saw the final page. It wasn't old at all. The ink was fresh. The handwriting was his. The entry read, "I will never leave this place. It will never let me. I belong to Duskmoor now." Ethan's fingers shook as he dropped the journal. His voice cracked in a whisper. "No, that's not possible." But from the upstairs hallway, the door thudded again, and this time it opened. The sound of the upstairs door opening froze Ethan in place. His breath hitched, shallow and rapid. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. Something waited at the top of the stairs. Something patient. He forced himself to lift the lantern again. Its glow trembled with his hand. The staircase yawned above him, each step swallowed by fog that had somehow crept inside the house. Slowly he climbed, each creak of wood screaming in the stillness. His heart hammered so loudly he was sure the entire village could hear it. At the top, the hallway stretched long and dark. The scorched door stood wide open now. A cold draft rolled from inside the room. He aimed the lantern's glow into the doorway. The walls within were blackened, the wood cracked and split. In the center of the room stood a circle of chairs. Each chair was facing inward. Each was occupied by a figure. Not people, shapes. Tall, thin silhouettes with no faces, their heads tilted toward the empty center of the circle. Ethan's throat went dry. The figures didn't move. They didn't breathe. They were only shadows. Yet the lantern light couldn't banish them. Instead, it seemed to make them darker, thicker, more solid. He stepped back, his boot brushing the mirror at the end of the hall. The glass cracked loudly. In its reflection, the figures all turned their heads toward him at once. Ethan staggered. When he looked back into the room, the chairs were empty. Panic clawed at him. He stumbled down the stairs 2 at a time. His lantern almost slipped from his hand. When he reached the bottom, the journal still lay on the table. The final page was open again. Words had been added, not written with ink, but gouged into the paper. "We are the Watchers. You are ours." Ethan's chest tightened. He slammed the journal shut and ran out into the square. The fog pressed closer now, thicker than before, alive and pulsing. Every cottage seemed to lean toward him. The windows glowed faintly as if lit from within. Yet he knew no one lived here. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This can't be real." But then he heard them, footsteps, dozens of them, soft, dragging, circling him in the fog. He spun wildly, lantern held high. Shadows slipped just out of reach, never close enough to see clearly. His instincts screamed for shelter. He bolted toward the church again, the heavy doors still ajar. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the footsteps stopped, but the silence was no relief. He walked cautiously toward the altar. The faceless cross loomed above him. His lantern's flame flickered, almost dying, and then chanting, low, guttural, rising from beneath the floorboards. Ethan dropped to his knees, pressing his ear to the wooden planks. Voices whispered from below, dozens of them overlapping, chanting words he didn't understand. The rhythm was wrong, too slow, too heavy, like a heartbeat made of stone. He yanked the lantern closer, shining its glow over the altar. There was something carved there beneath the black cloth. He pulled it back. His stomach lurched. The altar was etched with hundreds of names, each name crossed out with deep slashes. At the bottom, one last name had been added: Ethan Carter. His knees buckled. He stumbled backward, clutching his chest. The chanting grew louder, the voices pressing against his skull. His lantern sputtered out. The church plunged into darkness. And then, eyes. Dozens of pale, glowing eyes opened in the shadows all around him. They blinked slowly, in perfect unison. The Watchers. Ethan screamed, fumbling toward the doors. He burst outside into the square, gasping for air. But the fog was no longer just fog. It had weight. It had form. It pressed against him like invisible hands guiding him back. He ran to his Jeep. The keys shook in his hand as he jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the mist. Relief flooded him, until he realized the beam revealed a wall of cottages ahead. He slammed the wheel, turned hard, tried to find an exit. But every road led back into the square. No matter how fast he drove, the village folded in around him like a maze. The fog thickened, swallowing the headlights whole. He slammed on the brakes, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. When the fog parted for just a moment, Ethan saw them. The circle of chairs, sitting in the middle of the square now. Every seat filled, every faceless shadow turned toward him. Ethan's Jeep idled, its headlights trembling across the circle of chairs. The Watchers sat in silence, unmoving, their faceless heads all turned toward him. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Sweat dripped down his temples. "This isn't real," he whispered again, voice cracking. He slammed the accelerator. The Jeep lurched forward, tires screaming across the cobblestones. He aimed straight for the circle, but when the headlights hit the figures, the seats were empty again. The Jeep plowed through nothing but fog. Ethan skidded to a stop, chest heaving. His heart thundered against his ribs. He looked around. The square was gone. The village stretched endlessly in every direction, cottages repeating like a pattern that never ended. No, this isn't possible," he muttered. He backed the Jeep up, spun it around, tried another direction. The fog shifted with him, swallowing the roads, spitting him back into the same spot. He was trapped inside a loop. The village would not let him leave. His headlights flickered once, twice, and died. Darkness swallowed everything. Ethan hit the steering wheel, rage mixing with fear. Then he heard them again, the whispers. "Join us. You are already one of us. We never leave." He stumbled out of the jeep, clutching the lantern in shaking hands. Somehow, it sparked back to life, casting a weak, golden glow. The light fell on the fountain in the square. The angel's face was no longer broken. Instead, it had taken form. His form. Ethan staggered backward, bile rising in his throat. The angel's stone mouth moved. "Welcome home." His scream tore into the fog, swallowed before it could echo. He turned and ran toward the cottages. Door after door slammed shut as he passed. Windows rattled. Curtains twitched. The village was alive, and it was closing in. He darted into the church again, slamming the doors behind him. The air was colder now. The chanting had returned, louder than ever. He stumbled toward the altar, lantern shaking. The journal lay on the altar now, the same one he had found earlier. Its pages fluttered as though caught in a wind he could not feel. Slowly, against his will, Ethan reached for it. His fingers opened it to the final page. His name was there, carved deep, bleeding fresh ink. But this time something had changed. Below his name were more words. The last one. Ethan's throat closed. His chest burned as panic clawed at him. "No," he whispered. "No. I'm not staying here. I'm not." The lantern sputtered and went out. He froze in darkness. The chanting stopped. For one awful moment, there was silence. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Descending from the staircase above. One step. Another. The sound of something dragging across the floor. Ethan's hands shook as he fumbled for his flashlight. The beam stuttered on, weak but enough to see. At the bottom of the stairs stood a figure. Tall, faceless, a watcher. Behind it, more shapes emerged. Dozens of them filling the church, surrounding him. Their pale, glowing eyes blinked in perfect unison. The chanting returned, but now he understood the words. One becomes all becomes one. We never leave. Ethan stumbled back, clutching his chest. His flashlight flickered and died. Cold hands touched his shoulders. His legs gave out. He fell to his knees as the watchers closed in. In the final second before darkness consumed him, he felt something strange. Not fear, not pain, but acceptance. The village had taken him. He was theirs now. And when the fog lifted, the square stood silent once again. The fountain angel's face was broken once more. The cottages were still. The church doors hung open. No trace of Ethan Carter remained, except for the journal on the altar, waiting for the next visitor. Its final page now read, "We never leave, and neither will you." If you survived this story, leave a candle emoji in the comments and so we know you are still here. And if you want more nightmares, more haunted legends, more voices that whisper in the dark, subscribe and join us, because the night is only beginning.